Hey, I think we're back up here. I'm Speed at the bottom of the helix. Our next presenter's layout is based on the main 2-foot gauge Wiscasset and Waterville and Farmington Railway. The 10-foot by 12-foot room is filled with scratch-built structures, cars, and hand-laid track built in On30. Let's welcome MMR.
Thank you, Speed, and welcome everybody. I'm going to share my screen here, if you don't mind.
Click on share.
All right. So as Speed said, I'm modeling the Wiscasset, Waterville, and Farmington Railway. It's in On30, and this is in my home in just outside of Houston, Texas, where I moved here in 2012. So it's a prototype-based layout based on a 10-foot by 12-foot spare bedroom. We don't have basements down here in this part of Texas because it would be an under the house swimming pool. The scale and gauge is ON30, which is O scale with 30-inch track gauge, which is the same as HO gauge. The prototype is, we said, is a 2-foot gauge Wiscasset, Waterville, and Farmington that was running in the state of Maine in the early 1900s. My layout I started construction about a year after I moved down here, and that was in 2013 when I started. A little background on the prototype in case you're not aware of it. So the prototype started out as actually the Wiscosset in Quebec. So the folks in Wiscosset wanted to take advantage of their deep water port along the Sheepscot River at the mouth of Sheepscot, where it enters the Atlantic Ocean. And their plan was to build a railroad north to Quebec to serve as a bridge when the St. Lawrence River froze up in the wintertime. I don't think they really talked to the people in Canada, but that was their plan. So if you look at the map, they made it as far north as Burnham, laying track starting in the mid-1890s. There in Burnham, they ran into legal issues with the Maine Central. They wouldn't let them build a crossing. And they also ran out of money. So they wound up pulling back the track to the town of Albion. They soon decided to reformulate their plans, and they built west out of an extension out of the Weeks Mill town with the intention of going into Waterville and on to Farmington, where they could hook up with the Sandy River and Rancho Lakes system and form a big network. Well, once again, when they got the Kennebec River on the wrong side of Waterville, they ran out of money and they ran into issue with the Maine Central. So they did rename themselves as the Wiscasset, Waterville, and Farmington Railway, and they settled into operating the railroad as this Y-shaped entity. They did secure a sizable contract with the American Woolen Mills in North Vassalboro to haul coal from Wiscasset up to their power plant. And that went on very well for many years, and they eventually lost the contract to I think an electric railroad up that way. And that kind of shut down the line, and they pulled it back to Weeks Mills. So they abandoned that extension. And then they settled in for the next several years, simply running from Wiscasset up to Albion. The last train ran on June 15th, 1933, when a southbound out of Albion jumped the tracks around the Whitefield Bridge and wound up, the engine completely off the tracks. The crew walked away, and the trains never ran there again. So these are the prototype towns that I've working on my model layout. The town of Wiscasset, there's a milk stop called Prebles, and then the town of Albion. So my layout goals were as follows. I wanted to build as much of the prototype as possible with focus on the town of Wiscasset. It's a seaport town. It's got a lot of scenic elements that I found attractive. It's also the largest town on the layout. 2, I wanted to use the research materials available to scratch build as many structures and equipment as possible. In fact, building models is my favorite part of the hobby. I actually call myself a modeler with a railroad. The three, I wanted to learn new techniques and methods in this scale. I've been a N-scale modeler for more than 2 decades, and jumping to O was quite a shock to my senses. But I wanted to learn new techniques and methods in building this particular layout. Number 4, I wanted to include an operating scheme that focused on switching and car forwarding. I envisioned this as a big switching layout, if nothing else, moving cars around and hopefully getting a destination. I also wanted to limit the alterations to the room and keep it respectable for visitors. This bedroom is in the main part of the house. It's a single-story house. First of all, I couldn't make any alterations to the room because it is a bedroom, and I'll have to go back to be a bedroom. And I also wanted it, instead of closing off the basement door like I've done in the past, I wanted to leave the door open and let family and visitors to the house see what I'm doing. So here's the layout track plan as it stands right now. As you can see, it's 10 foot from bottom to top, and it's 12 feet across there. It's point to point. And I was able to get those 3 towns in that I mentioned, Wiscosset at the top, Albion at the bottom, and I squeezed in a flag stop of Prebles on the side. So a lot of people want to know what the basics of construction. I used the standard 1/2-inch plywood with some homosote on L girders. The L girder in the rear is actually screwed directly into the wall. I have very few legs, just generally in the middle. I hand laid all the track using microengineering code 83, which is about 60-pound rail, those are spiked onto 1/8 by 1/8 inch basswood ties. Turnouts are all hand laid, mostly number 5s using a fast track jig with hand thrown ground throws, and I have a few blue point switch machines as well. I wanted to keep everything non-electrical as possible. I did also build some scratch build some special turnouts in place in the yard. I was going to use DCC with sound, and I had a Digitrack system, so I just used that. I just have the panels. I don't use wireless. I just have 3 universal panels scattered around the layout that I can move from one to the other and plugging it in. Operations, like I said earlier, I wanted to include that, and the prototype had 2 round-trip mixed trains, and I run them sequentially. So I go from north to south, south to north, and then back again during the day. The trains are pretty short, no more than 4 cars and a locomotive. The car forwarding, I use car cards and a single way bill with empty car order cards. So I'll show those a little later as I go. So let's walk the layout. So I don't know, Speed, if you can zoom in on just this. This particular camera, as far as guest. Let's go. All right. So as I mentioned, Albion was the northern terminus, and I wanted to model that. And at the far north end, I ended up behind the door on a very narrow shelf. That gave me about 2.5 to 3 feet of extra track. And at the end is literally the end of the track where they pulled up the stakes from Burnham and pulled back here. That's a flanger I've got parked there just because I don't know what to do with it. And it's still summertime here, so I don't need it. This little building flat against the wall represents the Portland Canning Company. This was pretty common up and down in Maine. Those are husking sheds are represented where locals would come in and they would husk corn or shuck peas and the like to feed the canning plant that would be behind it. So as I said, here's some of the close-up of the track that I hand spiked. The ballast is actually just dirt. The prototype didn't spend a lot of time or money on good quality gravel, so it wound up just being dirt. And that dirt came from my house in New Hampshire. When I moved down in 2012, I brought a 2.5 gallon bucket with me. The movers, I didn't have it hard to tell them what was in that bucket they were carrying, dirt. As we move south down the line toward into Albion, first of all, it's a narrow shelf. It's the shelf around the layout is about 22 inches deep, and in an N scale, that's a pretty good amount of real estate. But in O, it's not very much space. So I tried my hand at forced perspective here. So I took the road and how do I end it against the backdrop? And I had it curve into an S. And if you look closely up there, you'll see a little HO scale Ford truck coming around the bend. And I've reemphasized that illusion with the telephone poles. The one on the far right is the O scale, and the one farther is just miniaturized. I'm not sure what scale it is, probably about HO. But I tried to get that illusion. To keep that, you need to make sure you limit the view so it doesn't spoil it. So if you move left or right, everything disappears. So you can't really see that you're looking at an HO truck. That truck is about 9 inches from the edge of that boxcar. Moving south across Benton Road, we run into the two-story station. This station was kind of unique on the railroad. They actually started as a one-story station, and they raised the roof to create an apartment for the station manager, station agent. That little car there was a find. It was a $5 bargain basement car at one of the train shows. It's a 1910 Buick Model 35 touring car that I painted up and made it more respectable and put it on the layout. The interior of the station is detailed and lit. It was quite a project that I took on. The windows, as you look at the end, the window on the bottom floor is bigger than the ones on the top, and I couldn't find any commercial castings that would do that. So I wound up scratch building all these using microscope cover slip glass and then gluing on the mullions, pre-painted mullions. All my buildings are just about have interiors. That's one of the things in O scale I enjoy, is that the windows are big enough and everything's close enough you can see inside. So they're all lit with LEDs that run on a bus underneath the layout. So as we continue moving south, we can see the single stall engine house, again scratch built by me, and I included a full interior. If you look inside, you can see some folks working at it on some project inside. The turntable was also scratch built with some plans. This particular railroad has a lot of research material available. There are books and books written about, keep in mind it was a railroad that was only 40 miles long and only lasted about 40 years. I think there's probably about 40 books available. So next to that is a coal shed. They would bring coal in, and you can see there's a flat hopper. It was simply a flat car with boards held up with stakes that they would bring up from Wiscasset and shovel it in there. Continuing on, as we go across the tracks, this large building in the corner is a potato warehouse. These were built by the railroad to take advantage of the potato crops that would come into view here in season towards the end, and it kind of serves like a grain elevator. So they would store the potatoes in here so they could be sold throughout the year rather than just during the harvest season. I'm sure that kept the prices pretty stable for the product. That is a miniaturized. This is the one thing that's not to scale so far. It's probably about 75% of its actual size. It's tucked into the corner. You'll notice it's a two-story, so it's built into the hillside and help keep the temperatures cool and warm in the wintertime. Looking off to the right, this little platform here is actually a milk platform owned by the Turner Dairy company, and the morning train would start by parking a reefer here, and it would be loaded with milk cans from the local farmers that came into Albion, and they would head off. That little house across from the track from it is also owned by the dairy, and it's for two employees, Vern and Kip were their first names, and they would take turns riding the reefer down the 40 miles to get to Albion, and they would every time the train would stop for milk at a regular station or a milk stop, they would jump out and load the milk. When they got there, they would work all day, and then at the creamery, and then they would head back on the last train of the afternoon, early evening, and dropping off empty cans along the way. In front of this locomotive, you'll see a stack of lumber. Lumber was a key commodity for this railroad. There was a lot of lumber that was cut into what's called box boards. These would be used to make boxes. This is all before corrugated was popular. But interestingly, there were no sawmills actually on the railroad. So what they would do is the sawmill would cut them. They would be either trucked in or brought in by wagon, and they would be stacked along the right-of-way where they would cure over a period of time, and the railroad would load them up onto flat cars or box cars as the need was, and ship them down to Wiscasset. So we head on down the seacoast. So the last structure in the town of Albion is the Crosby Tank. It's actually located about a quarter mile outside of town. The reason for that, the railroad didn't want to pay for municipal water, and there was a spring, natural spring, about a quarter mile outside of town. So they built this, and so the locomotives actually have to leave town and come down here and get water. And this actually wound up being yard limits for up to the water tank. I wanted to include some type of animation for this layout. So I looked at this and I thought if I could get the spout to go up and down would be great. My youngest son is a very talented electrical engineer, and he said, Dad, he goes, I can hook you up with an Arduino and a servo and a bunch of stuff I never heard of. And I could get this thing to go up and down. And I chose a different path. I actually used a 1/4-inch threaded rod through the fascia with a wooden knob that's actually a closet pole hanger. It's flipped around, a wooden pole. And all I do is need to turn the crank, and the string goes up and down. Easy. I've actually got my locomotives, the DCC function F6 for the water fill sound, so I can time that. This gives a little extra play time for this very small layout. So the crews need to make sure they have water before they leave town. So, like I said, this is the town of Albion, and it stretches about 12 feet across the blank wall. One of the things that people ask a lot about is my lighting. So the homes down here in Texas have irregular roofs for the pitches as they move up and down. So it runs anywhere from 8 feet up to 10 feet. And I thought hanging lights on the ceiling would be kind of difficult. So the other challenge was that the walls have a dimply texture. So even though I painted the entire room sky blue, I didn't want to paint the backdrop directly on there. So my workaround was to, first of all, take masonite, which is 1/8-inch hardboard. I don't know what you call outside of the U.S., and I've nestled it behind the joist. It sits on top of the L girder, and then the joist pinned at the bottom. And then at the top, I'll hold this up here, and you can see this cleat. It's a 1x2 cleat that I cut a groove in the back, and I just screw those in the joist, and it pins the masonite, the backdrop material against the wall, so it's just free floating. It's not attached, so the masonite's not actually attached to the wall. Then I covered that cleat with I think it's 3.5 or 5.5-inch wide strip of masonite that I painted the same color as the fascia, and I left a channel at the top to run the wires for my lighting. And the lighting is simply swing arm desk lamps I got from the office. Almost dropped the camera. From the office supply store. I actually had to run around to about 6 of them in Houston area to get enough, because each one only has 1 or 2. And these are hardwired. Wires are safely wired and protected with tape and wire nuts, and I inspect them regularly so there's no fire. And the lamps inside are simply 5,000 Kelvin bright white LEDs that are dimmable. It gives me lots of bright light in the room, and has worked out very well. The backdrop itself is hand painted by me. I learned the technique from a gentleman by the name of Chris Lyons. He's out of Canada. I think he used to be in Ottawa, and I heard he just moved to the East Coast. He has a series of YouTube videos where he shows this technique, and basically, I'm going to point here. You can see. So this is the backdrop I'm rubbing against. So there's very little scenery in front of that, and that basically is just two colors I use of artist paint. It's yellow and Mars black that are blended together and then just dabbled on there. That barn next to it is something I kind of developed a technique. I'm sure somebody else has figured this out before me, but I take photos of real buildings, or their barns or houses. I print them out in a Word document on paper, cut them out, and attach them to the wall, and then blend them in with the paint. And it gives a little extra depth and that human touch, as I like to say. So next on the list, I'm going to back up here slowly so it doesn't mess up, is the town of, is the milk stop. I wouldn't call it a town, but Prebles. So if this was a challenge, this is a 10-foot span across from one wall to the other, but there's a 6.5-foot wide window that it has to span. And the window has it's very deep, so I was actually able to steal some real estate. And if you look, I go around the corner there. So I cantilevered the joist across the back, and it gave me a little extra real estate and give me a little more room to make the curve. The town of Prebles, like I said, or the stop of Prebles is a milk stop. So it's like a flag stop. So the train in the morning will stop if there's smoke cans. This is one of the kits I have on here. This is from Portland Locomotive Works out of Ohio. This is for the station. I was going to scratch build it, but he had a nice little kit, so why not? The truck is a cheap toy. Again, it's a 1/43 scale truck that I whacked off the back of a delivery van, added a bed and new wheels, and call it a day, and a bunch of stuff on it. So as I move down the line here, this is my, I wanted to do something in this corner. And once again, the guy at Portland Locomotive Works, he was offering this moose as a 3D printed model. And I bought it because it's Maine and there's got to be a moose. So I decided to build a swamp here. And this is my first ever attempt at actually modeling water. All the years I've been building layouts, I never actually had any real water. So this swamp is Envirotex Light, poured in a few layers. Obviously, I finished the bottom first. But if you look carefully, you might be able to see, like right in here, that's some of the same backdrop paint technique that I put on one of the early lower layers and poured over top. And it kind of looks like scum. So I was kind of pleased with that. The lily pads and the cattails are from, I think, JTT. The trick is I got a couple of different colors and I tried to blend it again with some paint so they don't all look like one or the other. One of the challenges I really faced, and I didn't know what to do, is the pine trees. So there are a lot of people who make pine trees, but no one makes the kind of pine trees that are in Maine. Maine is called the pine tree state, and when they're talking pine trees, they're talking the eastern white pine. Eastern white pines have a very distinctive look. They tend to be broader at the top and lower and taper to the bottom as the lower branches fall off. They and they're kind of scraggly and not very pretty looking, but they are to me. I knew I needed to have these. I found a guy on a blog, a guy named Ryan Mendel out of Canada, who had a technique where he uses Caspia plant material I got it from Michael's and drilled holes into, made trunks, and then wound up, and you stick those in there, and then I use a very short flock material held in place with lots of hairspray, the cheap hairspray. So I've built about 12 of these so far around the layout. I'm really quite pleased so far. I've got materials to make another 12, so I'll spend some Saturday when there's no college football on doing some of that. So next on the list is the town of Wiscasset. As I mentioned, this is the town that I really wanted to focus on. And because it is a seaport town, it basically, the town itself isn't on the ocean, but it's on the deep waters of the Sheepscot River. And so it does see tides. Before we go too far, we should probably take a look and move this train here. So this train parked here. I'll try to move a little closer here. The locomotive is something I just finished last weekend. That is a kit bash of a standard Forney from Bachmann that I turned into a smaller Portland style 18-ton model. Shortened the whole thing and replaced everything just about new on that. But it's a nice running mechanism. The boxcar behind it is a kit from Train Troll, and then the RPO combine after that is a Bachmann passenger car with laser sides from Deerfield River Laser out of Massachusetts. So you just replace the sides on the standard Bachmann model. So let's get started here. Move this thing out of the way. Try to give it some gas here, and we'll watch it come around the corner here into Prebles. This is one of my favorite shots. Sometimes I'll just come in here and watch a train go by. But being point to point, I have to stop it at the other end. So normally I'd blow the whistle and all that, but I can't do that with one hand. So as we back up, we're gonna give it some more gas and turn off the bell. I just installed the DCC decoders and all that and speakers last week in this thing. I haven't even finished like tweaking the programming on it, but it's right now it's the best running locomotive I have. I only have 3 locomotives on the layout. There's not much room for more than that. So let's clear this, pull it in Albion. We'll move down here. Sorry for the movement, guys. But this is another one of my favorite shots as it comes into view into the station. How to rest the camera. There we go. So now we can head back to the town of Wiscasset. Like I said, this is the town that really I wanted to focus on. As you enter the town of Wiscasset out of the trees here, you cross over this trestle. This trestle is going not over the river, but this is called a tidal basin. This is an area where the tides rise and fall, I don't know, about 15 feet or something during the day. I've got it set at going down. The tide is going down, and it's about 2 feet below the high water mark right now. So this area in the back turns into a mud flat. A lot of people look at that, it's just smelly and everything. I always find these fascinating. So this is also my second attempt at the forced perspective. So I wanted to make it look deeper than it really is. So that blue house poking out there is an HO scale building I've whacked off part of it and stuck it against the backdrop. I turn around here, that yellow house back there is an N scale house that I've also cut in half, and then just blended it in with everything. So once again, this camera is about 20 inches from the backdrop, so but it tends to look better than further than that. Once again, to keep the illusion going, you need to block the view from certain angles. So the station on the left blocks the view, and then the trees and actually the layout over here keeps you from peeking around too much. The water, once again, is Envirotex light. I poured, and then I've got some gloss gel, medium gel on top, and to form the waves, and then I highlighted some of those waves with some white acrylic paint. This station is actually the first building I built for the layout. I actually built it when I still lived in New Hampshire. It's nearly the right length. I just removed, I shortened it by one of these spans so that I could make it more, fit into a layout. Although I built it first, I'm still working on adding details. I'm actually trying to add parts of the inside to make it more realistic as I do some research on it. So this was the main station for the narrow gauge in Wiscasset. Right next to it is the crossing with the main central, a standard gauge that actually started out as the Lincoln and Knox, and now is been turned into a branch of the main central that headed up to Rockland. This is my third go at forced perspective here. So I wanted to do something with the tracks as they disappeared, and not just truncate them against the wall. So I kind of made them curve off to the left, and I narrowed the rails, shortened the ties, and then to continue the illusion, the baggage and freight station for the main central. The front building is actually built to S-scale. So these here are S-scale fixtures, and then that fades off to HO scale in the back. I've even narrowed the walkway here. It's narrow as you go back, and even the railing goes back. So to show you, if we had a drone back then in the 1920s, you would see that how I did this. So to rise up above it, you can see everything gets narrow. It's been quite effective. It's one of my favorite scenes again, and I still have a couple of trees I want to plant over here to help hide that those tracks going around there. You may have noticed the ball signals. This is the only signals on the entire railroad. And the practice was, if there were two balls elevated, the narrow gauge had the right of way of the crossing. And if only one was raised, then the standard gauge could take the track. Once again, I use that sophisticated crank with a 1/4 inch threaded rod to raise and lower the string. The real scenic part of this of the prototype is what I call the waterfront scene. This was inspired me to build this when I bought the book called 2 Feet to Tidewater, and there was a painting of the scene on the dust jacket. I bought that in the late 1980s, and I just got around to building the layout. So if you look from left to right, it's dominated by about a 5 to 5.5 foot trestle that crosses this is basically the Sheepscot River along the shore. The narrow gauge had to build that because the real estate on the other side of these buildings was already occupied by the main central. So to gain access to these industries, as well as the wharfs that are down south of here, they built this trestle. You'll notice there was even a couple of sidings on here on trestles. So that was quite an interesting build for me. I had never done that, but it's worked out very well. The buildings are truncated a little bit. They're actually much deeper than that, and you have to make some compromises, but otherwise they are to scale. So these buildings were built to drawings I got from Peter Barney. He's a well-known historian and author and modeler of all main to foot information. So on the left, the brown building is called the Wiscosset Grain. This is the Wiscosset Lumber, and here's the Turner Dairy. So in fact, here's that car that Vern or Kip probably rode in on this morning. at least they gave him a window to look out. So I even did some research, and I started, what it looked like inside. So I built as much of the inside. This lower area I've designated as like the shipping and receiving. On the top, there is, on the second floor, I have a mechanical creamery, a cream separator that I found plans, a picture online. And then the top would be the offices, and no one's working there today. Once again, I use the Envirotex light and then some gloss gel median. This little boat I found casting in a bargain basement. The dory with the lobsterman putting his boots on is a kit from somebody I don't remember, but it's a well-made kit. The other thing I want to point out is the road. This is called the Long Bridge. Today, there's still the bridge there. It's U.S. Highway 1 that runs from Upper Maine all the way down to Key West, Florida. It kind of disappears off into the uphill and to the left behind the creamery that are on my grandson's layout that I arranged and took pictures at an angle and glued them on there to give the illusion of it going uphill. This little building here is really not there. In the prototype, there would have been a very large grain building. I didn't have room for it. In its place, my wife found this kit from Deerfield River Laser. It's a lobster shack or something to that effect. We saw it at a train show. I bought it and didn't know what to do with it, and I decided to plant it right here. Today, if you drive around that area, you'll see a little restaurant called Red's Eats. It's literally a lobster shack, and they've been voted the best lobster rolls in all of New England. Red's wouldn't have been around there, but I pay homage to him. This is Red's Lobster Repair, so he repairs lobster traps. So he's hoisting up a lobster trap right now to get to work on it. One of the things I mentioned in earlier is how do I my operating scheme and car. I use car card. So I have I use a system that is a series of. Let's see if I can get this in here. Of single waybills. I've used car cards on my N scale layouts in the past. With the 4 cycle, you keep turning them from A to B to C to D, back to A. I found that repetitive here on a small layout. So I saw an article in one of the OpSig newsletters, and called a single waybill. So it's basically there's only one waybill on there, and it got me to looking into what is actually shipped on the layout on the real railroad. So everything from potatoes to lumber. So when I go, we'll go over here and I'll show you. So I have these boxes. So there's actually a flat car on the waiting to be sent out and delivered to Albion. So what happens if an industry needs, it's more of a pull system. So an industry issues a freight waybill, and then the railroad needs to find the right equipment and deliver it. So if it's not available locally, I have these empty car orders. So this says to deliver flat to the Albion team track, and there will be a single waybill waiting for them over there. So this part of the layout was another challenge. I wasn't going to build anything here originally, because there's a closet. That white area above is a closet door. And I didn't want, this is a bedroom after all, and I didn't want to lose the storage, because that's where we hide all of our kits and supplies that we don't want everybody to see, our room of shame. So to gain access, I got the idea from the series on Model Railroader on their beer line, where they had a layout built on casters. So this part of the layout here is built on casters. From here over is rollable. It's held in place with suitcase clips under here, and then there's a 4-prong plug that carries the track power and the LED bus for lights over there. I don't get in and out of there very often because it is still a pain in the butt to do. And I haven't dropped anything on the floor yet, so that's a miracle. So here's the engine service facility. On the prototype, it wasn't located here. It would have been located on the other side of that tidal basin. There was a huge yard up there called the upper yard. I had to give that up because that would have taken up most of the whole room. So, but I did pull some of the features and the equipment. So there's the water crane. That's where the locomotives would have topped off their water. This is a 2-scale engine house. It's a 3-stall engine house. I've truncated the 3rd stall against the wall, and it turns out the prototype by the mid-20s wasn't using that 3rd stall anyway, so I didn't lose anything. And you'll notice there is a drive-through on stall 1. I've put some details in there and what have you, and of course some lighting. The turntable is an altered kit from Portland Locomotive Kit Works. It operates on a spider mechanism, which is like a wheel or underneath. I'm not going to take it apart right now to show you because I got number 4 parked on there. Number 4 is another kit bash of a Forney by Bachman. I turned it into an 044. It's still a large locomotive. It's represented a 28-ton locomotive as opposed to that little one we looked at. It was an 18-ton. Back here in the corner, by the mid-20s, the railroad had built this large, very long, large coal shed, and coal would be delivered there and stored and then brought out and delivered up and down the line to either their own coal sheds or to customers up and down the line. But I just built it as a flat against the wall. So that brings us to the upper yard. I'm sorry. So this yard, I'm sorry for jerking around. So one of the things, this is the only switching yard on this end of the layout, and one of the things it feeds is the wharf. This was the fun part and the last thing I've actually worked on here in this part of the layout. So as I mentioned earlier, they had a deep water port, and there were actually several, like at least 3 different wharfs along the Sheepscot River that ships would come in and out of. But this is the one that was served by the railroad. It's called the Railroad Wharf, and it's not to scale, but it does feature all the buildings and functions that were on the prototype. Starting with this station with a witch's hat, I call it Witch's Hat Tower. There's a lot of discussion about what it's actually used for, but I use it as a harbor master's office, and then to service the steamboats, passenger steamships that would come in and out, who wanted to drop passengers off and who could connect with the railroad. And one of those would have been the Silesia. So this is a ship that I just finished building a few months ago. I based it on some sketches I saw online, as well as a smaller vessel that I had a kit of, and it's all scratch built. It just sits here so I can move it off, but it sits on here, and this would have dropped passengers off. They come up the steps and they would connect with the narrow gauge. So once a day I drop off a passenger car on the wharf so they can connect and head north off of the ship. The other big ship you'll see here is a 2-masted schooner named Dorothy Glenn after my late mother. The ships such as this, and this is a fairly small one, but they came much larger. But these were older vessels that came from some other practice or trade, and they would rig them for a schooner, fore and aft, such as this, so they could be handled by a small crew. And they would go up and down the coast hauling bulk freight, such as coal, slate, lime, what do you call it, plaster, lime. So up and down, as well as lumber, and this one happened to be loaded with lumber. They didn't venture very far from the coast, and they became known as coasters. So There was an interesting book I read some time ago about that. It's pretty fascinating. So this one was scratch built. I built this in the fall of 2017. And in the summer of 2018, I took this to the Lone Star Convention in Austin, Texas, and quickly became known as the guy who brought a ship to a railroad convention. So after the few laughs and a few kidding and everything, at the end of the weekend, it did earn Best in Show. So after all the aggravation and worry, I was quite proud of that. I mentioned coal as another important commodity. So sometimes these ships such as this would bring coal in. And this A-frame here, that I'm pointing at, hopefully you can see, it was a hoist, steam-powered hoist, and it would lower a large bucket into the hold, and it would be filled with coal by men with shovels and strong backs. And then that would hoist it up and dump it into these hand carts. Let me see if I can get a better view of here. So this hand cart right here. And then that would be brought along this tramway and then dumped into bins on either side of this coal shed. And then there would be originally there was a spur coming off of there and into the coal shed where they could load it. And that was supplying that American woolen mills. By the time I'm modeling of 1925, this was no longer there. So at one point I thought, I think I'll leave it off the layout, but the more I looked at it and got some input with some friends, I decided to add it because it's just so cool looking. So the other part of here, this is called the transfer yard. So this is where the railroad would deliver cars to be interchanged with the main central. It was carried across just from the standard, between the standard gauge and the narrow gauge. So this does two things for me. It gives me an industry spot, and it also points out to visitors the difference between the sizes. And this boxcar on the left is a pretty small boxcar. That's an early 1900s boxcar of the main central. But it does show quite a difference in the look. Yes,
Did you mind
absolutely.
answering some questions as you go?
I chose ON30 because for years I actually tried to model an HON30 and I could never get anything to run. And I abandoned the idea. And when I decided to get back in to attempt the O scale, I couldn't find any ON2 equipment that was reasonably priced. And then when Bachmann came out with their ON30 Forney, it was reasonably priced. I had DCC and even sound, and it ran well. So I bought one that was the number 7, which is going to run here in a minute, and the rest is history. So everything is built to ON2 O scale standard. It's just the track is a little wider.
Okay.
Oh yeah, yes, there absolutely is. So let me show you this. This is this is actually the first layout that came into the room. So I told you I was in an N scale for a long time, and my closet was full of N scale stuff. I have 2 grandsons. So their name is Peter and Lucas. And so this is their layout they're building with me. So I've done the track work and the electrical, because things have to run, but they're building everything else. They're building the buildings. Right now they're 6 and 7 years old. They've been working on this for a couple of years. They've even let me turn on the light here. They've even done the backdrop. That's that backdrop. So when I hear people say, I can't paint a backdrop, they painted that when they were 5 and 7 years old. So please, they're still under construction. It's funny, the older grandson, he comes in, he wants a switch list. So he's actually switching. He had to stop the other day in the middle of dropping off or picking up that lumber bulkhead flat. So yeah, it's part of paying for it. It's all that equipment I had available. So
Okay, another question. Is it best to build scenic breaks into a layout rather than larger panoramic views?
Well, when you go around the room, you already have scenic breaks. Like I can face Albion this way, and I can't see Wiscasset because it's behind me. I mean, I can turn around and look. I've had layouts that go the other way around where they're on the inside, and they're, yeah, some type of scenic breaks. But I think it's important to kind of like have some dead space. So like if I look over here, there's dead space here. All right. And even the swamp is dead space.
Yeah.
So it's not just going from town to town, even though it literally is. My layout, I've always built them high. I think it's like 50 some inches high. I think it's about almost 60 inches high. I've done that for a long time. First of all, I liked looking at it high. Even when I did N scale, I had it high. You get two things out of that. You get a really good view. Like right now, my eyes are about 8 inches above track level. So I'm not flying a drone or an airplane up above like many of the layouts I've run. So you really feel like you're in the middle of it. The other thing it does, it gives you space for all this other stuff. So I have 2 workbenches. I have one there. I have shelves. If I go around, I have another workbench over here. I even have a little mini fridge over here. My wife says if I had a bathroom here, I probably would never come out, and she's probably right. So.
You mentioned some part of the layout is on casters. So
okay,
I'm
going to walk over here. So this was the most difficult part. So I actually have to cut right here I actually have to cut through these turnouts. So those are held in place with printed circuit ties and screwed and glued. I had to recently fix this one. I haven't hidden this screw here. It was popping up. And it actually goes around here and that away. So when I pull this out, this whole building is cantilevered out and pulls out. So if you look, you can see it, but it really gave me an extra 5 feet plus this bump out for the wharf. Here's some of those blue points I was talking about I used. I really didn't need them here, but I thought, what the heck? I labeled them so I know what the heck they are, because 2 days after I installed them, I couldn't remember which one was what.
That was really cool.
Sure.
You gonna run that last train? So
this is the first locomotive that I bought. It's almost out of the box, Bachmann. Oh, I forgot to turn the sound on. Yeah, let's try that again. Here we go. I just recently replaced it with a new Tsunami decoder. The one thing about the Bachmann stock decoders, they weren't all that great. They didn't have too many functions. They were fine. The other thing I didn't mention, but number 82 and the coach actually have sound cars in them. So you can actually hear and it squeals and brakes coming on and off with them. So it adds a little extra thing, especially you have to remember to unconscious them when you uncouple them. Otherwise you drive off and the thing is still squealing.
Yeah.
It comes with it. You just pick which one you want. You get to. It's the same thing you would do with another one. CVs. You can pick like flat spots on wheels, the frequency of certain things happening. Actually, the lights on the coach there's 2 lights in that coach that are operated by the sound by the decoder. So sorry. It has to stop because the signal's down. Don't run through the signal, which I think I just did. Oh, that's because I'm trying to use one of these Digitrax throttles with 2 knobs, and of course, when you turn the wrong knob, it doesn't do anything. Yeah, like I said, this is almost I moved some details around. Here's an example of those loads. These are just, knock those off. So these are box boards headed to the ship. And I do them so you could just loads in, loads out. When I get them there, I check them out. I originally tried to hook the chains and all that. It's just not worth it. So I just kind of glued them down. Any more? Yep.
Well, Pete, thank you very, very much. We would like to stop the stream so we can recover the Facebook problem. So how do people get in contact with you?
The easiest way is they go to the Lone Star regional website. They can go through NMRA or whatever, and I'm one of the officers on there. So just you can look my name up. My Gmail's on there. Okay.
Cool.
Well, thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you very, very much. We'll ask Corey to take it from here.
You bet.
And hope
Bye,
to
everybody.
see you again soon.
Okay.